And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson. National Signing Day, less than a week away. And Bud, this is a year in which we knew that the entire recruiting process was going to be unlike anything else. You know, the official visits were basically entirely scrapped. We did have some unofficial visits and some impermissible visits along the way for a few of the coaches at some of the top programs. But, you know, in the course of this, we want to make sure that we set the table for National Signing Day, let the listeners know what they're keeping an eye on, the teams to know some of the big picture storylines. And, you know, I think that there's always going to be in this early signing period, an inflation of interest in whoever's left on the table because of scarcity, right? Just because, you know, those 4 stars that are left are the highest ranked available players. As you're looking across the entire landscape based on, you know, what are the splits looking like for the early signing period and who we're still waiting on to sign coming up next Wednesday on National Signing Day. Of course, keep it locked to 24/7 Sports for all of your signing day coverage, CBS Sports HQ as well throughout the day on Wednesday. But, you know, have you been surprised at all? What do the splits look like and sort of what's been your reaction?
So, Chip, a lot of great points there, and I'm really excited about signing day. I would say that if you had told me in September that all but 30 of the top 247, which is the top 247 players in the country for 24/7 Sports, if you told me that all but 30 of them had signed in the early signing period, I would have said you were crazy.
217 out of 247.
They signed.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I would have, at the time, people we were speaking with thought that some kids would hold off, especially guys who didn't, you know, were not spring enrollees, would hold off because they thought visits would open up and thus you'd actually be able to go to see some campuses and meet with some coaches in person because none of that was able to happen this year. A lot of players are signing with schools that they've never visited or certainly with coaches that they've never met in person. They've never been to a practice to see how that works, to see what the vibe is on the field, locker room, or campus. But with the dead period being extended as it was, you had this element where these kids realized, I'm not going to be able to visit in January or February either. So I might as well just go ahead and lock my spot up. And so they did. So I guess once it became clear to me that the dead period was going to be extended, I no longer really thought that we were going to have a big national signing day. I thought early signing period would be pretty big. And indeed it was.
The often, you know, we go into national sign days and recruiting periods with, you know, like the rich getting richer type mentality. And there's going to be no surprise that as we start to talk about the race for the number 1 class, Alabama currently holding that spot right now. Ohio State, correct me if I'm wrong, pretty much the only team that could probably catch Alabama. And if so, that would take a couple mini levels of decisions for the Buckeyes to be able to eclipse the Tide for the number 1 spot. So Alabama and Ohio State battling for the number 1, like that's nothing unusual. Were there any teams that were unusual, like with things being different? Because I put myself in the mentality of a head coach and a coaching staff that now has to do all this virtually. And I wasn't sure if that would open up the chance of being able to see someone who is not a traditional recruiting power, or maybe a coaching staff that had not been recruiting at a certain level, really being able to level up. Would it also mean that, you know, there was some shortcomings along the way, because it's just different communication when you're having to do pretty much everything virtually and you're having to really rely, even not only with the recruiting process, but with the evaluation process as well. You're going to be a little bit handicapped in that, really trying to count on your relationships with some of these high school coaches and some of the scouts that are locally around the prospects that you're trying to entice. Like, were there any, has it been pretty much true to form from that matter, from the top on down, where, you know, your Alabama, your Ohio States, your Georgias, your Clemsons, those teams and those programs that would have been there in a year where everything was normal are still pretty much recruiting at that same clip?
I would say for the most part, there were some many surprises. Alabama it's extremely possible that Alabama signs the highest rated recruiting class ever, eclipsing that 2010 Florida class, which was the last major Urban Meyer class for the Gators. So that if you told me, hey, we're going to have the highest rated recruiting class ever, yeah, I mean that would surprise me a little bit. I would say LSU, with the disaster of the season that they had and the turnover that they've had with the coaching staff, them still signing a top 4, top 5 class, maybe a little bit of a surprise. I think I would have thought maybe more in that kind of 6 to 10 range, but here, as we record this, they sit there at number 4.
Is it mostly Louisiana? Like, are they? I mean, they're just doing it from the same old spots.
Yeah, for the most part, they focus a lot on Louisiana this year, and next year I think they're going to focus even more on Louisiana, and that is a direct reaction, in my opinion, to A, the state being very talented, and B, last year they had some out-of-state kids who they thought they had in the bag, and ultimately those guys flipped on signing day, including a really good receiver who flipped to Maryland there on signing day. 2 West Coast schools who did really well, and I think it's worth pointing out because of the fact that they didn't play until very late in the year and didn't have a lot of buzz. Oregon landing its highest rated class ever, number 6 under Mario Cristobal, including 18 4-star commitments per the 24/7 Sports composite. And then USC at number 8 with a strong bounce back. I mean, if you recall, just 2 years ago, a terrible recruiting class by them, rated, I think, 67th in the country. So that those are nice. I don't say total surprises, but kind of, a little bit better than I thought they were going to do. And in a couple teams, I think if you look at it on the downside, well, by the way, Michigan still had a 13th rated class.
That's about standard, right? That's pretty good.
Yeah, well, but right, most of these kids signed during all the Jim Harbaugh questions.
So, Donovan Edwards, that was a big one. It felt like because he was an in-state kid, to get a good running back, to get somebody who's going to come in and be able to be a part of the offense. I remember at the time him signing on a snowy field outside. It looked cold as hell, but Donovan Edwards was excited that he was going to be able to go suit up for Big Blue. And I did see, it was so funny. You pulled out that stat to the top 247, the top 247 players in the rankings. I was clicking. I kept clicking more. I got through like 150. I didn't see many that were uncommitted, but I felt like I saw some M's. There were some M's out there in the top 150.
Oh, Chip, that's not uncommitted. That's unsigned. We have a lot of other kids who are committed and they just haven't signed yet. I mean, the number of uncommitted is pretty low. So we do have some kids. If you want to run that down real fast. Sorry, I was answering a text from Trey Scott, our editor of 24/7 Sports. So I'll butcher this name every single time. And
let's start at the top. First, wire-to-wire number 1 prospect since Robert Kimdichie, JT Tuimoloau.
Yeah, so just a freaky good player out of the state of Washington. We've known about him for a long time, about 6'5", 275-ish. The thing is, what is he? Is he a jumbo pass-catching tight end, which you would think at that size, no way. Is he a strong side defensive end, which is where we have him listed? Is he going to grow into a defensive tackle? I think that's also possible. The thing is, you don't see guys this size go and legitimately perform in basketball on the actual football field in pads, and then also go out there. I've seen this guy catch passes in 7-on-7 and move around with rare agility, and that's, of course, why we have him as our number 1 player on 24/7 Sports. Now, is he as good as like a Jadeveon Clowney, who we've had as the number 1 player before as a defensive end? I don't think so. And we don't have him rated over a 100, but still a big time impact player. This was an interesting battle. Was it going to be Washington, Bama, Ohio State? Could USC do some damage like they often do on the West Coast? Ultimately here, I think his relationship with other prospects from the state of Washington, going to Ohio State, and his relationship with the coaches there at Ohio State will lead him to the Buckeyes, which would just cap an awesome class for Ryan Day.
Damn. Oh, all right. So who else is in that? There are other players from the state of Washington that really make up this strong Ohio State recruiting class, which is incredible because we're going to end up looking at it especially if this happens, where Alabama, having potentially the highest ranked or highest rated recruiting class of all time, gets a headline, with Ohio State having one that could have been number one potentially in other years.
So Emeka Egbuka actually is our number one rated receiver in the country. He knows JT very well, and they're pretty tight. In last year's class, they actually signed G. Scott Jr., who is also from the same area, and they've played, I believe, on the same 7-on team. They know each other. G. Scott's thriving there at Ohio State. So in absence of being able to visit and meet with coaches in person, having somebody who's on the inside, certainly a benefit for JT to get information about the Buckeyes. And look, let's also, it's not from Washington, but Ohio State's next quarterback seems likely to be CJ Stroud, who's from Cali. And so there's a little bit of a West Coast flair on this team, which they've also signed dudes from Zona and more guys from California. I just feel like if you're going into that locker room, it helps to have more West Coast guys to make you feel at home.
100%. Earlier this week, 24/7 had a great rollout for finalizing the 5 stars. Because remember, 5-star, we are projecting you to be a first-round NFL draft pick. That means there's only going to be 32 of them. I love the specificity, and I love the exclusiveness of it. One player who fascinates me because of 2 things. Number one, the way that he has risen in the rankings. And then number 2, he falls into this stretch where, because of, and I know there's going to be several other players here, but Heisman Trophy winner Devonta Smith was rated higher by 24/7 than it was by the rest of the industry. And there are a few other players that have also fallen in that path of 24/7's been a little bit higher on him than what their composite rating is. So tell me about safety Terrion Arnold. He is, because of the 32 that were revealed on Wednesday, 30 of them are unsigned. We just mentioned JT Tuimoloau,
who, by the way, JT could take this past signing day. So we might have continued drama there.
So Terrion Arnold recently upgraded to a 5-star. He's outside the top 100 in the composite, but right there at like number 30, 32, somewhere around there in the updated list. I mean, but we're talking Florida, Alabama, Georgia. Isn't he from the Tallahassee area?
He is. Yeah.
So have you gotten a chance to see him, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was actually able to see Arnold pre-shutdown. So you're looking at a guy, good length, really explosive, nice instincts. I think he has the ability to probably play corner or safety, depending on the defense. I mean, 6 foot, 180 as of last measurement, probably a little bit bigger now. Good basketball player. I believe he actually thinks he's going to play basketball in college. We'll see on that. A lot of guys think that. Not a lot of guys actually do it. But you're looking at a Florida, Bama, maybe a little Georgia battle in here. Most people think Florida right now, but with the way that Alabama has been recruiting this year, you're not real bright if you're just totally counting out the Tide. That he's one of the final players that I think Alabama would actually take in their class in terms of talent and actually having need and fit and room in terms of numbers. A really nice player for us, and somebody that I think we're very comfortable as a company having above the composite, which I know we just talked to Ohio State. We are way higher on Travion Henderson than the rest of the composite as well, the running back going to the Buckeyes. And we were chatting this morning as a group, and it's like, man, I really would be comfortable going even higher with him. Although just that he's, I think we said this on a prior Cover 3 show. Henderson, if he was at Ohio State right now,
would have been
really wouldn't shock me if he had started in the Natty.
That's right. I remember you saying that. Who, as we start to work our way down that list, I mean, you've got the list. The ones that stood out to me: L.J. Johnson, Rajon Davis, Tywone Malone, Brian Thomas, Destin Hill, Avante Dickerson. I think that was about as far deep as I got. Any direction, any one of those players. Take it wherever way you want in terms of who you're really excited about to see what they end up doing and what it'll mean for the particular program they choose.
Sure. So I'll go ahead and hit on 3 of those. Rajon Davis is a kid who was committed to LSU for a while. Ends up not going to sign with LSU. I think he's a really nice prospect. He's a dude. He's kind of a run and hit linebacker, but we've also seen him with his cover ability in 7-on-7. Now that was as a junior. Obviously, the state of California has not played any football to date this year, except for some of these little unauthorized leagues that are popping up. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but they've got these kind of just unofficial games that where the rosters kind of resemble some of these high school teams, and it's
I
kind of
like
cool.
that. Is some like Tennessee Titans working out at Clark Lee and Barton Simmons' alma mater, Montgomery Bell Academy kind of stuff.
Basically, yeah. So I think he's going to pick USC. That'll be a great pickup for the Trojans. Now, Tywone Malone, big time defensive tackle out of the state of New Jersey. A&M, Ole Miss, Rutgers, Florida State. Used to have Tennessee in there. I think it's probably safe to cross Tennessee off the list, just given what's going down there. He's also a hell of a baseball player and probably an instant impact first base bat at any of those programs. And if you notice, all three of those programs that I mentioned, with the exception of Rutgers, and Rutgers is the hometown school here, they all have really good baseball programs. So he's a guy that is being dual recruited to play baseball and football. Of course, for the readers or listeners, not readers, who don't know, you have to use the scholarship in football so that you can't just hide football guys in other sports and use those scholarships up. He visited all three of those schools recently. A lot of people think Ole Miss has the upper hand here, but he's not really tipping his hand very much. And that's going to be a fascinating one to watch, to see where he does go. He's bringing his parents on unofficial visits and checking them out and doing his research.
How many defensive tackles are also playing baseball? Is that, am I just being like way too basic with that thought, with not expanding my mind to believe that, I don't think that happens a lot.
So most of them grow out of it, right? There was a kid named Jacoby McDaniel. You remember him? He was a D tackle at Florida State in like 2010 to 2013. He was a top 10 kid nationally recruiting wise, or at least for a while he was. Now Tim Smith is a guy who gets some run for Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
I do not think he played baseball as a senior, but I do, I got a chuckle at his coach at the time telling me he was their left fielder. I was like, Tim Smith's like 330. This guy's a left field. I mean, but at some point he was a baseball guy, which probably helps to explain the hand-eye coordination that he seems to have with using his hands. It's uncommon. Most of these guys outgrow the position. Malone, just pull up some of Malone's videos of him hitting the baseball. That sound it's different. He's got some bat speed.
Nice. And who was the third one that you wanted to tackle?
The third one I want to bring up is a linebacker from Georgia named Trevin Wallace, one of the better linebackers in the country. Jeff Hafley, who I know this pod thinks very highly of, did a nice job, scouted them out. They had him committed for a long time. And then the big boys came calling. And it's just a good example of how you have to try to figure out what the right fit is. If you find this kid in April and you think he might be like a top 200 player, can you really hold on to him by the time signing day comes around? Auburn's offered, Kentucky, Florida State, several other schools. So we'll see what happens there. Nice scouting job by the Eagles, but they won't be able to hold on to him, and we'll see what he does come signing day.
Sorry, Jeff. You ain't at Ohio State anymore. It's not exactly the same pitch. The biggest sporting spectacle of the year is nearly upon us. We know everyone loves making their picks, no matter if you're a diehard fan or just tuning in for the big game. So we think you'll also love this opportunity. Enter the CBS Sports Football Props game for your chance to win the $1 million jackpot. That's right, $1 million if you can correctly answer all of the questions, and a guaranteed $50,000 to the winner. And you can win all that money without risking anything. Football Props is free to play. Just visit cbssports.com/props or download the CBS Sports app to enter. Once again, that is cbssports.com/props or download the CBS Sports app to enter.
So a little thing on that props idea.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody who like all these Joe Paycheck folks who casually bet the Super Bowl, they want to see action. They want to see things happen. So they're going to bet yes on props. Will there be overtime? Will there be this? Will there be that? And they're going to bet overs on all of the Travis Kelce, receiving yards, Tyreek Hill rushing yards, things like that. There's so much public money in the Super Bowl that these numbers actually do tend to get inflated some. You're probably not going to get rich just doing this. But if you want to just be an antagonist and maybe make a little bit of coin, generally betting the nose and the unders is a much smarter play unless you're getting in very early. So be sure to check William Hill instantly to see those numbers right when they come out, get maximum value if you do want to go over.
Well, and in the contest, you're playing against the pool, and so it is the like zig then zag contrarian play where you got to assume that you could get yourself that 50K going in there and picking against the group, especially if you think it's going to play out like that.
Also, for that, just if you think about this, if you're going to win this pool, you need to have a correct game script, right? So your picks need to make sense and correlate with each other. You probably can't take Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Sammy Watkins, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire if he's playing all over. There's only so many yards to go around. So you need to have the right combination of yeses and nos that gets you to, I don't know, Pat Mahomes 400 passing yards, right? Like you can't just go all yes or all no if you're trying to thread the needle and actually win the competition.
If you think that if you think that Patrick Mahomes passing yards are going to be up, then you can't also believe that they're going to go with Clyde Edwards-Helaire rushing yards.
Right.
Like one's got to work with the other, without a doubt. Coming up on the other side of the different programs that have gone through some coaching changes, what does it look like for some of those going into National Signing Day, plus teams to watch on that decision day and more next? You mentioned Tennessee as one that if they were in the mix for a few of the remaining, 30 of 247 players, uncommitted, unsigned at this point right now. You know what? Tennessee, earlier in the week, we got Josh Heupel announced as the new head coach. Very tough for me to imagine that he's going to be doing much more than trying to solidify what he's already gotten. What's your sense of some of these programs that have undergone coaching changes, especially the ones, Texas included, that have all happened after the early signing day?
Sure. So Tennessee, I guess we'll start there. They currently sit at 15th in our team rankings based on the 24/7 Sports composite. They have 9 4-star commitments. However, their best player, Dylan Brooks, has already requested to be released from his letter of intent because they fired Jeremy Pruitt after Brooks signed, and he is not enrolled. So I most likely, I think he would get that release. I think it should be automatic personally. Like if your head coach gets fired before you enroll, that just kind of a little crappy bait and switch job there by the Vols. But they're not the only program to do that. Some good news though for Tennessee is that Caden Salter tweeted positive things in relation to the Josh Heupel hire, and he is their I guess if you take Brooks out of the class, he's their third best player in their class, a prospect we like a lot at 24/7 Sports, a top 150 quarterback recruit. So,
quarterback's going to love to see Josh Heupel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's a really fun offense to play in, and you're going to get a whole lot of reps. We actually have him on our top 247. He's the number 47 player in the country. So we are very high on Salter, an athletic, productive, accurate player. So that'll be interesting to see how Tennessee finishes the class. I don't expect Tennessee to load up on a whole lot more players come Wednesday. Texas is actually 17th in our ratings. They're looking pretty good, I would say. Steve Sarkisian has assembled a good staff. As far as I know, nobody has asked out of their class, probably because Sarkisian just had an awesome national championship game.
Sure.
And they're looking pretty good. They could maybe add a few guys come signing day if they want. And also work the transfer portal. They've already taken, not taken, but they've already had 4 transfers here: 1 from Notre Dame, 1 from LSU, a linebacker, and then a receiver and a corner. So that's actually something we should probably talk about, Chip. Is if you look at the recruiting rankings this year, there's some weirdness going on, and I think it's really important to look at not only your overall score on the 24/7 team recruiting rankings, but also the average player rating, because there are some of these schools that left open a ton of spots for transfers. For instance, Oklahoma is rated 10th in the 247 Sports composite. Now, they have an average player rating of 93. That's above Notre Dame, who's at 9th. That's above USC. That's above A&M, above Oregon, above LSU, who's even at number 4. So how does that happen? Well, Oklahoma only signed 16 players. Oklahoma, in theory, has room for about 9 transfers. They've already taken 3. They're rumored to be involved with other guys. This is something that we're seeing quite a bit this year. Now, if you're Alabama and you have the chance to take 25 of the best 50 players in the country from the high school ranks, you just go ahead and do it. But for these other schools that are sort of in that kind of very good to decent recruiting range, some of them are holding back quite a few spots. North Carolina, your school, they only signed 18. Penn State only signed 15. Florida State, where I went, only signed 16. They've already taken 8 transfers. Now, I don't know if people realize this at home, but transfers count against your cap of 25.
Right.
You only get 25 new players each year. That's high schoolers plus transfers combined. It's not high schoolers and then transfers on top of that in excess of the 25. So you're having to be really smart with this. And I wrote a piece for 24/7 Sports over the summer and basically said, I talked to some guys, and the line that stuck with me, they said, why would I make a 4-year mistake on a kid I've never seen and never worked out when I could take a 2-year player or a 1-year player who I know at least knows how to practice at a college level? He may not be great, but I know he can at least play. He's not a zero. And the 4-year mistake thing, given that scholarships are guaranteed at most places now, really kind of hit home with me. So you're seeing schools be a little more cautious. But then who benefits? To me, that means we're going to have some good players pushed down a little bit that are going to some G5 schools if some of those G5 administrators and athletic directors say, hey, go ahead and go high schoolers. We're going to be patient with you. We're going to be patient with the build. We know you have a chance to take a higher quality of player than you normally would. Maybe that flyer that, I don't know, let's pick a team here. Maybe that flyer that North Carolina normally takes on a kid who might be like the 21st player in their class some years. They don't take that flyer this year because they've only signed 18 high schooler commits. Maybe that kid falls down to Georgia State or somebody, right? That's very interesting to me. Now, the second part of that is once you realize those kids are good and they're on your campus, can you keep them with the transfer portal? But somebody's going to benefit from this. And I think it's going to be some G5 programs whose ADs are willing to be patient, and also some FCS schools, because there's definitely a little bit of a trickle-down effect this year with the portal going into effect.
In terms of just the way that it works and the process here, do some transfers end up getting added to these recruiting classes in the recruiting rankings? You use the example in North Carolina, and just off the top of my head, Ty Chandler, former Tennessee running back, is going to be transferring. Does he count as part of it? And is it one of these things where, we're going to lock in these recruiting rankings in February, but you and I both know that we're going to be talking about the transfer portal and the movement within the transfer portal all the way through the summer, that like those things are going to remain very fluid. So for the fans' perspective, some of them, aren't they going to be included almost within the meat of the recruiting rankings?
So there's kind of a multi-part answer here. Number one, we will not be putting them into our official 24/7 Sports recruiting rankings, at least for this year. There's a lot of complicated tech stuff that you have to do. You need to figure out timing, tech, rollout, et cetera. It would not shock me if in the future you have high school rankings, transfer rankings, and combined, new player rankings, so to speak, which combines the high school and the transfers. Once we get the spring transfer season over with, I am going to take a stab, not in any official capacity, just in a kind of a written piece for 24/7, at doing combined transfer and high school recruiting rankings by class to see. Now, most of your transfers are going to be 3 stars and 2 stars because there's a reason they're transferring. Most of your transfers are kind of damaged goods, at least most of them, not all of them, but
Sure.
The vast majority. It's definitely the future, though. I mean, you're looking at some of these schools that are taking 40% of their class as transfers. You have to address it as an industry.
And also one that has been able to continue to provide opportunities. Like I'm in general, I guess we haven't discussed this, but I remember I took this from Barton when Barton said allowing the best players to see the field and find opportunities where they can play makes college football better. And I tend to agree with that. The idea that somebody who's getting buried on one roster and can't see the field, that if he is good enough to be able to start and play in college football, for him to have the freedom and not feel locked in or stuck, to be able to go find a place where he can play, I think that makes the product of the entire sport better.
I agree with that. My only real concern about the transfer portal is, does it turn off fans of G5 teams? And like, can they fall in love with the player as a freshman or a sophomore? When in the back of their mind, they're like, man, if this guy's actually this good,
he's gone.
He's going to transfer to Georgia. Yeah. Like, now, granted, you are also going to get some kind of bounce backs. Like, look at SMU. SMU is killing it right now because they're getting all these bounce backs from the DFW area who have gone out to bigger schools, not been able to start, or lost their jobs, or got homesick. They come back. They want to come back to Dallas. SMU takes them, and SMU knew about them because SMU is located in Dallas.
Sure.
And they're killing it. So there's also that aspect where you're getting talented players who just didn't have opportunity before to come back to your schools. It definitely works both ways.
What are some of the handful of schools that you think have the most money on the table, the most on the line when it comes to these few remaining prospects, in terms of how it could break all positive, and they could see either a real jump in the rankings, or just even by your estimation, it would solidify their class. But then also, maybe if they don't get them all, then it's kind of a bad day for them.
Sure. So obviously USC needs to close strong with Rajon. I think Ole Miss has some real money on the table to make a splash with Lane Kiffin if they can get Malone. I would say Florida is a school that has a chance to move up quite a bit because of the Arnold potential. And that's an important one. I've covered this a lot in my piece called the Sunshine State Scorecard, where we look at the ability of the big three schools in Florida to keep that top talent home. And Florida has done a good job, but if they want to catch Georgia, if they want to catch Alabama, they need to do a great job of keeping talent in the state. And literally, they're going up against the top two programs that raid the state for Arnold. So keeping him in place, that would give them a tremendous secondary class, by the way, because they already have 5-star corner Jason Marshall. They already have 4-star safety Corey Collier. They already have 4-star safety Donovan McMillan. You're talking one of the best secondary classes in the entire country if they were able to get Arnold. So I would say Florida's on there. That's that next step that UF fans want to see Dan Mullen take. Speaking of Mullen, Matt Coca, our producer, just dropped this into the chat. Did you see that?
Brian Johnson off to the Philadelphia Eagles.
That's going to be interesting. I'm curious to see where Mullen goes there as a replacement. Now Mullen, I believe, is their play caller too, so it's not like they're losing.
Yeah. Would you, if you were an offensive coordinator who thought very highly of your own scheme and your own ability to call plays, isn't working for Dan Mullen a little bit of a turnoff?
Potentially, but I think you also learn quite a bit because Mullen is so bright and is a guy who clearly loves coaching. I'm not sure he loves recruiting, but he definitely loves coaching. Also, did you see this, what Coca put in there about the transfer stat from Clemson when we talked about how most transfers are damaged goods? No player who has transferred out of the Clemson program on their own accord since Swinney became the head coach has gone on to play in an NFL game.
I think Mike Jones Jr. could break that. I think Mike Jones Jr. is good enough to play in the league.
You know who else could? DeMarcus Bowman, who was only on campus for a semester and was a 5-star last year's cycle at running back.
There's a lot of things about Clemson's rise that, as Clemson truly makes the next step. And we're going to talk about Clemson as is like, oh yeah, you thought Clemson was good winning these national championships. Now Clemson's got the most talented roster in Clemson history. And next year they're going to have the most talented roster in Clemson history. Granted, they will be without a generational quarterback, but it does feel like some of those extra charmed wrinkles of Clemson, like you're just going to have to shed them because you're going to have to leave them at the door when you take that next step into being like otherworldly levels of elite.
You think that hit rate might be a little bit unsustainable?
Yes. Yeah,
it's possible.
I just think, and same thing with the assistant coaches. They had no turnover forever. And eventually these things are going to break down and he's going to have to reinvent. Dabo Swinney has done an incredible job of building up that program, but you're going to get challenges and you're going to have to reinvent along the way.
No doubt.
What other teams you think? That Ole Miss?
Ole Miss, Florida. Who else did I say? USC has a nice shot there. to go up. Those would be the ones that I'd be, really looking up. Now, I will say George Rooks too. He's a top 24/7 guy, I believe, based on the latest update. Big time defensive tackle prospect. Michigan, Penn State, Boston College. They could all get him and use a boost there. So that'd be pretty solid.
He is Bud Elliott. You can follow him on Twitter at BudElliott3. Be sure to keep it locked into 24/7 Sports for all of your National Signing Day needs. We will also be back with a National Signing Day recap show on Wednesday night. Once all the pieces have fallen into place to recap where some of these players went, the teams that benefited, and some of the biggest storylines of the day. Bud, thank you very much.